everything at a large scale.
You've probably seen videos online of massive combines and massive fields all over the country, all exemplifying this idea that bigger is better, more acres is better, more yield is better. So when people talk about getting into farming, they're always saying, oh, I don't have money to do that. How can I get in when everything costs hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars? So the question is bigger actually better, and is bigger the only way to go? And if that is the case, that bigger farms are better, why are there still so many farms struggling today? We're gonna talk about how we got to where we are now, where scale seems to be the only option. We're gonna talk with experts about what they think and what they see on other people's operations, and then we're gonna compare. Is farming 10,000 acres better than farming 10 acres? Or are there other alternatives out there that can help people make more money on their farm and still work in the industry without having to take out a loan for millions and millions of dollars? So let's get to it. So before we answer our question, let's break down how we got here. Let's go back to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a big deal. We saw the mechanization of so many different things in the entire world. We saw the mechanization of steamships, okay? So it wasn't just boats sailing around the world, which means you could move more grain faster in certain places. On top of that, we've got tractors, we've got combines, we have the invention of different dynamites and fertilizers that made it easier to grow more food in places that we couldn't grow food before. We saw a bunch of people flowing into the cities all around the world. So what we have is a mass migration of people into cities, leaving the countryside, and an industrial revolution that made the labor of farm work easier. So you could think even back then, people were saying, hey, we're losing our small family farms. We're losing farms, There are less people working in agriculture than ever before. But a lot of people would attribute that to the march of technology. There's just a need for less people in agriculture because of industrialization in agriculture, because of industrialization. So because of all that, we saw the first major consolidation. There were less farm workers, especially in America, with people who owned farmland. There was less of a need for people to be farming themselves every single day. And so what happens? Inevitably, people who own land buy more land. There's people leaving, going to the cities for different jobs. Okay, consolidation. I'm going to throw up a graph here that kind of explains the decline in farm population over the past 100 or so years. As you can see, we just continue to lose the farm population. So as we continue to lose the farm population, well, what happens? Consolidation. Okay, if there's less people farming and there's less farm operations out there, the inevitability is scale. So operations continue to scale, but you still have a lot of people working in agriculture. So let's fast forward 100 years. We go through several boom and bust cycles, and several boom and bust cycles later, well, what do we end up with? A continuing decline in the farm population, because every time it gets bad and the crops go low, we lose a few more operations. And then the people who are managed to weather those storms and continue to survive manage to buy out the other landholders. So what does that mean? It means that the process of economies of scale continue to take effect. So as we increase in size and we increase in productivity, the only natural conclusion is that prices continue to come down, as with any mature industry. As an industry matures, there continues to be consolidation and the squeeze on prices to the point of commodification. What I would say, what we're seeing in the agriculture industry now is the late stages of the commodification process of our food system. So to define what commodification is, we have to define what a commodity is. So what is a commodity? A commodity, as defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is a good or service whose wide availability typically leads to smaller profit margins and diminishes the importance of factors such as brand name other than price. So as with any business, farms have expenses. And the problem with farm expenses is that they have to be spread across something that you don't get to set a price for. The thing with a commodity is that you don't get to set that price. So when you don't get to set that price, your only option is to be as efficient as possible. And what does efficiency lead to? It leads to scale. Hence why we are in an era where there are farms that are anywhere from 5 to 10 to 100,000 acres sometimes. Sometimes it's the only option to survive. I guess that's the big problem with commodities, is that by definition, when you are growing a commodity, you are entering into a price war where you don't get to set the price. So in this war, your only option is to be the better, faster, and more efficient grower over someone else, because that's the only way to win. You have to be able to grow that commodity cheaper than your neighbor to make money at the end of the day. So because of the nature of a commodity market, that leaves you with two options. You grow and you scale and you become the most efficient, or you choose to niche down or enter into private contracts where you have more control over the price of the things that you grow. All right, so that's how we got here. So now how do we decide what is better, 10,000 acres or 10 acres? I decided to call my friend Jonathan and ask him about what he thinks.
My name is Jonathan Harrelson. I am a farmer and rancher. First generation, built our operation up and started Empire Ag. Empire Ag is the mothership. That is our consulting arm. We do a lot of business strategy and work with our clients. Have Empire Financial Services, which is our accounting arm, and we provide high-level CFO level services and full-scale bookkeeping and accounting.
The biggest question we're addressing is more acres better? Is bigger better? Yeah. Is 10,000 better than 10?
Clayton, looking back at a lot of my clients, we've got guys that are farming, 30,000 acres, dry land, Western U.S. type crops. Those guys are generating between $8 and $12 million annually in revenue. And then I've got guys that are 1,000 to 1,500 acres that are really focusing on, whether it's some of the regenerative practices, relay cropping, anything that they can add value. And those guys are generating, 3.75 to 4.5 million with some custom work and maybe some direct to consumer products that they're trying to do. So when you start to look at it, we grew up in the 80s. I mean, I felt like the push was always to get bigger. And we had that, equipment, the scale of equipment had just gotten to a point where the efficiency was there. And for us, gaining that efficiency, and we grew and grew and grew to a point that we're so efficient now, you're at a disadvantage if you're in Iowa farming 2,000 acres and you want to go to 4. Because a guy in Western Kansas is probably making more net dollars than you are if you gain more acres to try to achieve that same net profit. I know it seems counterintuitive. And then you go the other direction where you've got some folks that are doing some high-end flowers and things on a small, 200-acre farm that are generating $500,000 with no employees. So to me, I feel like the ramp, like we have two factions. Like if you want to be big ag and grow big acres, like that is fine. You can chase that. Make sure that you're in the proper spot in the country that you're going to be profitable, because there is a shift. If you look in the U.S., and we have customers all over the U.S. that we get to look through and work with, there's a big difference. And there are places that you would look at and say, I would not want to farm there, but they're making way more money than the guy that's in the prime dirt in Iowa or Indiana or Illinois, just because of where we've driven our cost basis on land rent, equipment that it takes to get that, the more bushels that we're running through the equipment. There's just a lot of factors at play.
Jonathan said something pretty interesting there. Where you live or where you're farming might be a very big determining factor in how profitable you are. And that is because we need to talk about the difference between revenue and profitability. I'm going to draw out for you a farm in Iowa and a farm in Kansas, both hypothetical, but both growing on 10,000 acres. So here we have our Iowa farm. Here we have our Kansas farm. The Iowa farm with 10,000 acres has a lot of revenue, okay? That's gonna be our revenue here. The 10,000 acre farm in Kansas has a lot of revenue, but it is slightly lower than Iowa's, okay? Here in the red, we have our expenses for the Iowa farm, okay? Pretty expensive to farm in Iowa. We've got a lot of equipment and we have a lot of land that is very, very expensive to maintain. You're running a lot of bushels through it. It probably wears out faster. We do have the benefit of a lot of rain, but you have a lot of expenses to farm here in Iowa. So here in Kansas, we also have a lot of expenses, like a lot of expenses. Running over that many acres is expensive, but our land is relatively cheaper. So here in the green is what we need to talk about, the profit. So right here, I'm gonna draw in our profit on the Iowa farm. Right here, I'm gonna draw in the profit on the Kansas farm, okay? This is what Jonathan was talking about. We have our guy in Iowa right here, okay? He's doing a lot of revenue. On paper, it looks like he might be making more money than the guy in Kansas, okay? But In reality, he just has more money passing through his hands. Okay? The guy in Kansas over here, yeah, he's doing less revenue, but the amount of money passing through his hands, he gets to keep more of that. Now, once again, this is a hypothetical example, but this guy in Iowa, right here, might only be bringing home $100,000 after a long year, even though he's doing millions of dollars in revenue. Whereas this guy in Kansas might be bringing home $250K plus. Now, those are pretty big numbers to take home as a farmer. Once again, these are just hypothetical numbers, but you can see how just because you're doing a lot of revenue and you have big acres in the right place does not mean you are making money. That guy in Kansas probably has way lower operational costs and is able to keep more at the end of the day. Yeah, he's got less bushels running through his operation. Yeah, he technically has less revenue, less dollars going through his operation, but he is still a successful farmer. And a lot of times the guys who have to run this lean
Is that Jolene Rison? Is that how you pronounce her name?
Who? Jolene Reeson?
Rison?
Yeah, I think that's how it is. Yeah. Just pretend you're a news anchor reading it off.
On that, do you say,
Did I accidentally start this? I
Kim?
think we might have accidentally started this. I think we're going, Neil. I think we started. I must have pressed the wrong button.
gotcha.
Oh, you know what I did? I pressed Command C instead of... yeah, I forgot I had that as a hotkey. All right, well, welcome to the Atlas News Show, or Ag News Show. Atlas Media is your high-quality source for media and marketing in the agriculture industry. My name is Clayton.
And I'm Neil.
And we are your hosts for the Atlas Ag News Show. We've got lots to cover this week. Let's jump in. So the big news that you and I have been talking about all day is there's a war in Iran. Since the last time we did this, probably, 4 weeks ago now, we've bombed some places. Some world leaders have been killed. And everything that we need to farm costs like 30% more than it did 3 weeks ago. Ag shippers are facing rising diesel costs, and farmers could share the bill. AgriPulse reports fuel is as high as it was in mid-2022. Elevators will feel rising prices, and so could farmers. The Agriculture Department's Grain Transportation Cost Indicators Index for trucking costs rose to 183 for a 7-day span ending March 11th, up from 147 the week prior. The reading for the specific freight costs rose from 148 to 157 during that period, while reading for the Gulf freight rates increased from 139 to 147. Yeah, I don't really know that much about the worldwide oil shipping stuff, but if the pumps are any indicator of what's going on, fuel is way up. There's, like literally last night, before I even finished writing this, they bombed that whole facility. And was it Qatar?
Yeah,
I think it was Qatar. Yeah, it was like 20% of their processing capacity went offline last night, which is like a very large portion of their capacity.
Yeah, one of the places that were hit produces 1/5 of the world's natural gas. So, we have tons of ships sitting in the Straits of Hormuz, too scared to go through. And it's a problem that's probably not going to be fixed anytime soon. We have seen rallying in the ag markets, and they're a little bit off there. I think corn actually did reach its previous high yesterday or maybe today. Beans haven't quite got there. I think they're within about 20 cents, but those are basically offset by our fertilizer and fuel. So we're in similar situations. Now, if you had your fuel and your fertilizer locked in, you've definitely made some money in the last couple of weeks. So is war good for ag?
Did you lock in your fuel prices?
I actually did.
And your fertilizer?
I saw fuel hit a 3-year low back during the winter, and I took that opportunity to lock my fuel in.
Every single time these world events happen, I always think, should I put a 500-gallon tank in my backyard? Just to have every once in a while,
And I think it's a good play, because if you do catch those, especially when you have historical lows, you know, you can fill the tank up, and you know, when prices run, you have some supply that you can burn through before you have to start feeling the effect of it.
So you're saying we shouldn't wait to the last minute to buy everything for the next farming season?
Now, I'm not always saying that, because a couple of years ago, you know, it was in the super cycle. I bought fertilizer in September, and then the market's been getting a crash, and the people that waited till spring, you know, I took a bath in it, and they looked really smart. So,
yeah, but everyone looks smart. You know, that's like the classic Twitter conversation or the X conversation. You know, it's like, oh, well, if you just listened to me, you would have had X, Y, Z, and you wouldn't have had these problems. It's like, okay, cool, but like, what about like the 5 years that you lost money by not doing that? You know, yeah, that's a whole thing.
it's like degenerate gambling, really. I mean, you just never know what. There's always the black swan event that can happen.
Isn't that farming though?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's, farming, it has so many different variables, and you can't hit on all of them every year. You just got to make the best decision you can make with the information you're given, and do the best you can do. And sometimes you make great decisions and you look like a hero, and sometimes you make the decisions and you know, and it costs you a ton of money.
Yeah. You want to talk about fertilizer?
Yeah. Fertilizer has seen some wild swings with this war event going on. Kim Chipman reports when Jolene Reeson was quoted $750 a ton for fertilizer last fall, about 15% more than the previous year, she decided to hold off until spring. And then came the Iran war. Bummer. As global supply chains were thrown into chaos, a retailer near Reeson's farm in northwest Iowa said she could book fertilizer but not get a fixed price until later. I've heard that before. They love to wait until those markets run. The next week, after waiting again to buy, the same dealer offered $1,000 a ton. That is a major jump.
25%.
That's rough.
Yeah, I just, it makes me think about, you remember when we had the bird flu coming through all the hen houses?
Yep.
I watched a video, and I think I talked about this last time. Basically, they were analyzing the quarterly reports of all the public egg companies that you know, actually distribute the eggs, and we were told in the news that the narrative was, yes, bird flu is going through, it's wiping out millions of chickens, which it did. That did happen, but like the price swing in eggs was significantly higher than the actual amount of like hens culled, like percentage wise, and there definitely was like, you know, the egg companies took like an extra 15% on that. They took that news article and they ran with it. They said, okay, well, everyone believes that this is because of bird flu. If we just tack on X amount of dollars on top of this, we're going to meet our margin. And maybe some of that was like proactive, like we don't know how many hens we're going to have to kill. Maybe that could have been a part of it. But like basically every time the news starts talking about any sort of subject at all, I just notice this with anything that's food related or bulk related, there's always a much larger increase than what's actually needed. You know, like I would love to see how much money the oil companies are raking in right now, knowing that this is all like happening in anticipation, knowing, hey, we're probably going to like have a lower oil supply, probably down by 20%. But what if we increase prices by 30%, you know?
Right. I mean, when you see supply shocks like this, that's the problem. One of the major problems with as a operator is those large fertilizer conglomerates can take advantage just because they're the one with the product, and they see the supply shock, and then they can take the added value in the market, even if the supplies are already in place. You know, and they're just padding their pocketbook. It's a difficult situation to be in as a farmer, and really as a either independent retailer. Or a medium-sized retailer, they're experiencing the same, you know, problems the farmer is. So it's not only a farmer problem; it's a retailer problem as well.
Yeah. So in light of all this, Bloomberg reports that Trump is seeking to find backup fertilizer sources. U.S. seeks backup fertilizer sources as Iran war disrupts planting. The Trump administration has moved to locate backup sources of fertilizers for American farmers at the start of planting season after the Iran war shut down a key source of supply. We've been all over the fertilizer problem, White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett said on CNBC Tuesday. I'm not saying that we can eliminate what disruption there is so far, but we can minimize it for sure. Sure. Hassett has said the U.S. Has established licenses for Venezuela to produce more fertilizer and has held discussions with Morocco. The administration has been engaged as an insurance policy against disruption, he said. While Hassett cited Morocco as having the world's largest reserve of potash, data compiled by industry experts show the North African nation to have the biggest phosphate rock reserves, while its potash endowment is relatively small compared to that of Canada or Russia. The U.S. currently has duties in place on Moroccan phosphate, which are under review. Pleas from the U.S. farm groups to remove these fees ramped up after the war began. The focus is getting supplies to American farmers. Hassett said it's almost planting season, and there's a lot of fertilizer that usually goes down. That's 100% true. So this got me thinking last night while I was kind of prepping all these articles. This brings up an interesting conversation. We all know this sort of stuff is going to happen, and it's going to keep happening. Like every time we have a world conflict, this happens. Like I remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, the conversation was around potash back then too. I remember during COVID, it was, hey, are we going to be able to get any of these liquids or these other fertilizers with all these border shutdowns and supply chain disruptions? Why can't we seem to get our head around better domestic supply or removing fertilizer dependencies? We have those two things. Like we don't have any really solid U.S. fertilizer infrastructure. It seems we're importing a bunch of stuff. We do get a bunch of stuff from Canada, but we've had our trade relations there. And also, at what point do we talk about controlling variables in farming, and like there are so many variables that you just can't control. How do you bring variables either into your control or remove your dependency on said subject?
I think in the U.S. it's a pretty difficult problem because they're huge polluters, and so inside the U.S., people are so cognizant of pollution, and we have such a large population, especially in areas where that fertilizer could be mined, and because of those reasons, it's been very difficult for a company to operate here successfully. The way we regulate our environment. Which I think, we have to be really cognizant of that because we do have a lot of people living here and we don't want to poison the population. So, what I would like to see is just really good relations with the places that can supply fertilizer. And so maybe we could supply them a certain good in return, let some of the duties come off of fertilizer so that there's a good trade back and forth, a free trade.
Chat, what do you guys think? What do you guys think of this whole fertilizer situation? Is this affecting your farm? Is this something that you're taking into consideration? Is this changing how you're planning your year? Are you trying to figure out how to farm differently to, deal with these supply shocks? I know, we've had plenty of conversations about it. Like, I think this brings up in my mind the conversation of low input versus input intensive farming. Like, I have the mindset going into farming this year in the Iowa farm is like, hey, we're not super scaled, but we're also doing it on a shoestring budget. Like, we don't want to take a bunch of money and put it into this venture right away. So how do we be as low input as possible and still get a crop off that's profitable? Like, that's really what's going through my head. Like, I'd be interested to see, like, what's your process and thinking through, like, what are you going to do on your operation this year, knowing, hey, there's probably going to be some sustained highs on basically every input we're putting in this year.
I think you got to look at every acre individually and figure out, hey, is this acre, does it absolutely have to have fertilizer this year? Can we cut back? What is the way to optimize the dollar spent? Because there's certain pieces of land, especially highly productive ones, where fertilizer is just not gonna bring you that much value versus your highly eroded or your less productive ground, where some fertilizer would probably help you out in a season. So I think you got to take those factors into consideration. I think there's also alternative sources you can look at, like if there's poultry in your area. Those poultry producers have been very fair with the farmers over the years. They don't when fertilizer runs up, they don't necessarily run their litter up, and I know that most of that litter is being used already by farmers that have continually used that supply. But develop relationships with those poultry producers in your area, especially the ones that don't have enough acres to farm their, to use their poultry on their own acre. And, I think there's other people looking at things like, pigs and cows where
I was
they,
going to say, I feel like the conversation around livestock has really picked up this last year, probably partially because, cattle's been at so many all-time highs.
Sure.
But I know a lot of guys who have lasted a long time, and we haven't seen it because we've seen so much transition out of, grazing land into cropland the past few years. But like a lot of really successful operations are diversified in the sense that they still have some form of livestock. Like if you are a guy who's had livestock the past few years and you've had row crop, tell me which one you're probably making more money on right now. It's probably been the livestock. But you would also say, hey, for probably like 5 years before that, you weren't making any money on livestock.
Yeah.
So you do kind of have this, like, I don't even call it tension, just this dynamic that you have of like, hey, you first of all unlock a fertilizer source, you develop an end source for your product as well. And on top of that, you can kind of play the market with now 2 different varieties of crops or commodities in this case. And then it unlocks so much potential. And I feel like I meet so many people who are successful doing it, but it comes down to, do you want to have the work of managing livestock?
Yeah, I think that's key. How much time do you want to devote to your farming operation? Yeah. But I do think that diversity going forward is going to be a necessity, and especially if you have multiple family members on your farm, or a diverse set of employees, some that enjoy animals, some that enjoy row crop. And I think going forward, you'll see more diversity in the ag world, like where we had kind of trended out of it and specialized. I think you'll see going forward that the farms reintegrate or vertically integrate. And we were talking about the other day, like if you are into cattle and you are row cropping, where you're grazing your wheat that you're eventually going to harvest, and even though you lose some of the grain just because of the cattle grazing, you gain on weight, and then you still harvest the grain and are able to market the grain that you successfully
Let's save the rest
harvest.
of this conversation for later, because I have some of those clips of Jason Mock on Barn Talk, as well as that article from Purdue, where we can talk about that a lot more, because I do think there is potential for a big shift coming. All right. Just a reminder, this show is brought to you by Atlas Media. Atlas Media is your go-to for high-quality media and marketing in the ag industry. This company that we run, Atlas Media, is the company that makes this all happen. So this show, all of this, all the YouTube videos, all the social media, it happens because we have a team behind this. So just keep us in mind when you're thinking about high-quality marketing material. Give us a call. Okay, so fires in the high plains. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and it has gotten significantly worse since the last time we talked. The devastation caused by 4 major wildfires, this is from Farm Progress, and several smaller blazes still burning across the western and central Nebraska has left ranchers struggling to find the words to describe the impact. Among the tragedies, Rosemary White, 86, of Arthur, died March 12th as these fires swept rapidly across the grasslands. Randy Sainer, a Nebraska Extension livestock systems educator based in North Platte near the Cottonwood Fire, spent the past weekend in Oshkosh Dunning, where he witnessed the fires firsthand. He said limited snowfall on March 15th helped contain the northernmost fires, but North Platte saw no snow, colder temperatures, and persistent wind. Over the weekend, shifting winds pushed the fire front back on itself in some areas, offering some relief. The trouble on Sunday was the cold temperatures, he said. Pumps were freezing on the firefighting rigs, so they had to bring in hot water to thaw them out. Oof. Tale of 2 regions. On March 15th, while cattle producers in the eastern half of Nebraska dealt with blizzard conditions that dumped snow, brought temperatures down in the state to single digits, and wind gusts in excess of 60 miles an hour, the western half of the state was dealing with a historic wildfire that continued to spread out of control. The massive Morel fire to the north of the Sands Hills displaced at least 25,000 head of cattle so far, along with loss of stored hay and forage resources. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm going to pull up a map of this right now to share, because I do think this is worth showing. So
I was shocked when I looked at it.
Let's see if I can get this to go. Screen share. Yeah, it is absolutely wild. Let me see.
I'm thankful to live in Kentucky, where I don't have to worry about wildfire.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this to work. Yeah. So I think this is something that we should talk about in terms of like the water issue that I just see happening in, there we go. Okay, let's see if I can get this all condensed down to where we need it to be. All right. Yeah, the water issue in Nebraska, and I think this brings up a conversation about the aquifer as well. If anybody here does happen to farm in the, oh, sorry
My
guys, having
goodness,
some
that's a
technical
big
trouble.
fire.
Yeah, so if we look at like Nebraska here, okay, so this is Nebraska all around here, okay? That's a lot. Like this is one fire right here. That's one fire only. So this is about the size of Rhode Island, and there's a couple more down here. These ones have reached some higher containment levels, but you know, if we just look at the state from above, this thing right here, this fire is taking up a pretty big region of the eastern part of the state.
I wonder if that's like 2 or 3% of the state. Maybe that's burned.
It's got to be a high percentage. Spencer's supposed to fly out there on Monday. One of our video guys is supposed to fly out there on Monday to Denver and do some work on this eastern edge of Colorado and western edge of Nebraska. And so I'm shocked we're even going on a project out there. I should probably call them. That'd probably be a good idea. But yeah, super sad. I think we've got to, be thinking about the, implications of what happens as we continue to see a drier western portion of the United States. Like when we talk about all this, I think it's easy for us in the areas that get a ton of rain to be thinking, oh, like we're fine, we got all this water here. But I think it's just easy to forget, like there are a lot of places in the U.S. that aren't getting a lot of water, and as you go farther east in Nebraska, you get over that aquifer, and who knows how long that aquifer is. Like you and I know a guy who's moving his operation to a different portion of the country because he's just like, I have so many pumps over this aquifer and I can't stake the future of our family's farm on this land because I don't know what's going to be in 20 years.
Yeah, I think there's several people that are definitely considering the Ogallala aquifer getting low, and I think there's areas where it's already like it's the water's basically salted because they're at such a low point. And so they can irrigate a little bit, but they got to really watch how much water they put on the ground because, of the sodium that's coming out of the water, and it poisons the ground if they water it too much. So it's like you've got to have water to grow the crop, but you can't put too much of the irrigated water on there because you're causing added problems. It's definitely the drought that has been a consistent problem over the last 4 or 5 years in the West is definitely expanding, and it could make it here. We haven't had a drought here since or a large drought, small drought last year, but we hadn't had a large drought in this region since 2012, so we're due one.
Yeah. Iowa had one a couple summers ago where it was just a really dry summer, but once again, like we complain about dries, and we still have some record corn yields, so I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah, and Kentucky's the same. Like we still had, now I'm not going to say the whole entire state had a fantastic corn crop, but here in this area, even with the drought, we had a great corn crop. So, we can manage through some of the dry weather and still come out with a pretty good crop due to good soil.
JBS workers in Greeley, Colorado strike amid low wage issues. Mike Pearson tells listeners about the JBS workers striking over wages as beef prices hit record highs. Nearly 3,800 workers at the JBS packing plant in Greeley, Colorado walked off the job today in a dispute over wages and workplace policies, threatening operations at one of America's largest beef processing facilities. The strike, authorized by United Food and Commercial Workers Local 7, comes after 8 months of stalled contract negotiations. Union President Kim Cordova says workers are demanding wages that keep pace with inflation and an end to JBS's practice of charging employees for replacing safety equipment worn out during normal work duties. JBS has canceled slaughter schedules at the Greeley plant for the entire week and is rerouting cattle to other facilities, including Cactus, Texas location. The company maintains it has bargained in good faith and calls it an offer strong, fair, and consistent. This timing could be more challenging for the beef industry. Beef prices have reached record highs in 2026, driven by a national cattle herd that has shrunk to its smallest size in 75 years. Despite reporting $581 million in the third quarter profits last fall, workers say they haven't seen those gains reflected in their paychecks. Yeah, that doesn't shock me at all that a bunch of packing plant workers are striking. It does not strike me, pun intended. Yeah, that's not crazy at all. JBS claims that they've been fair, but I have another large packing plant in our town where I live, and you talk to anyone who works there, there's some diehards, which I don't know why they love the company so much. And then you talk to like 90% of other people, they barely speak English. They bring in a lot of immigrants to work these jobs because they know that they can't fight for themselves. Some of the conditions these plants are, not great. I'm not saying Greeley is this way, but the packing industry as a whole, it is hard to find people willing to cut meat for a living. So
Yeah, I think that's a tough job. And, I know they do depend on a lot of immigrant labor too, to take care of that responsibility.
Yeah, so this doesn't surprise me at all. We're not in the cattle industry, so I don't understand the implications of it, but we already have very high beef prices. It wouldn't surprise me if this makes it worse. We are already at reduced packing capacity in the U.S., but we also have a smaller herd size, so I don't know what that all looks like. We need to get some cows and really start to understand this industry more, because I feel like when we get into this section, we don't have as much context as we probably should for what's going on. We probably should have just called Jonathan. That probably would have been a good call.
I do know that the drought in the West is definitely affecting the cattle herd too. They can't. It's very difficult to run cattle on grass out there, so they have to feed cattle a lot due to the ongoing drought out there, and it's just adding to the supply issue. So lots of issues in the cattle industry.
Absolutely. Remember that Josh Link guy we talked about last week? Who was on the run, the one that the FBI...
Oh, they caught him.
Yeah. Let's see. Progressive Farmer reports Agri-Dime's Joshua Link captured at LAX. Man wanted by FBI and Agri-Dime fraud captured by feds at the Los Angeles airport. This is great. Agri-Dime executive Josh R. Link was wanted by the FBI and was captured at the Los Angeles airport by federal and local authorities on Monday, according to the FBI's office in Dallas, Texas. According to a post on X, the FBI in Dallas said Link was arrested by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, LAX Airport Police, and an FBI task force from the Los Angeles Police Department. A federal grand jury in Fort Worth, Texas, indicted Link and 4 other Agri-Dime employees for their alleged roles in a $220 million nationwide fraud scheme involving cattle purchase contracts. Link was a resident of Stafford, Missouri, and was charged with 10 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and 2 counts of money laundering, including wiring more than $527,000 to purchase real property. Josh, if you ever watch this one day, you deserved it. It's okay. You can go to jail. I have very low tolerance for a few things when it comes to our industry, and one of the things is fraud. So, you want to talk about the next thing?
Yeah, while we're on the topic of fraud and fraud in Missouri, no less, let's talk about the McBees. Very popular ag TV family. Feds say the McBees committed trust fraud. So this is an article linked from Progressive Farmer. It says, Lincoln, Nebraska. Attorneys for Steve McBee and his sons have argued that the transfer of assets to his sons was part of the normal course of business for a family trust. But the U.S. Department of Justice attorneys countered in a court brief the transfer was fraudulent, and the case against the family should be continued. The star of the reality television series, The McBee Family Dynasty, The Real American Cowboys, pled guilty to crop insurance fraud and is serving a 2-year prison sentence in South Dakota. The governor later filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court, District of Western Missouri, alleging the Gatlin, Missouri farmer transferred assets to 2 of his sons, Cole and Jesse, to avoid surrendering the businesses as part of paying a still outstanding $4 million judgment in the crop insurance fraud case. McBee's attorneys argued in a motion to dismiss in February 26 that the trust for the 2 sons were created more than a decade before the transfer of assets was made in 2024 and was part of an established practice of trust. In response to the motion to dismiss, the DOJ said the McBee claim about the trust is irrelevant to the case. Fraudulent conveyance law looks at substance, not form, the DOJ told the court. In other words, in what form McBee made his fraudulent transfer does not matter. What matters instead is whether the transfers were actually or constructively fraudulent at the time of the transfer. In its lawsuit, the government offered a timeline of events to make its case. In June 2023, Steve A. McBee was notified about the federal investigation. In 2024, McBee's attorney met with prosecutors, and on January 7, 2024, McBee transferred ownership interest in 3 family LLCs to his sons. And then in November 2024, McBee pleaded guilty. Aside from proving actual intent to commit fraudulent transfer, the government argues fraud is established because the transfers were made without consideration and McBee could not pay his debts. Tough situation. It says here that the restitution is still unpaid. The government said that although it has been months since McBee's sentencing, he has yet to pay any of the restitution. The judgment ordered McBee $4 million restitution of debt to be paid immediately, and the DOJ said in its filing it hasn't been paid yet.
Once again, fraud is fraud, and you can commit fraud in a lot of ways. You can commit fraud against a bunch of companies. You can commit fraud against a normal insurance provider. General rule of thumb that Neil and I have discussed a lot is that the government specifically will always figure out how to get their money. So if you commit crop insurance fraud that is federally subsidized, the government will come from you. I also know that there are several other outstanding lawsuits against them. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it would not surprise me given the structure of all this and how and when he transferred everything to his trust, that they will come for those assets in trust to repay that said, fine that he has agreed to owe. So it kind of frustrates us that these are the people that got a reality TV show. Maybe we're just a little jealous that they got a TV show, but it's like, it makes for good TV. You got to admit that it makes for good TV, but it's sad when we have so many people going to bat for people who, like, within the ag industry, we know, like, hey, crop insurance fraud is still fraud. Like, it's not okay.
Yeah, and it does seem to give the industry a semi-black eye by just seeing that type of thing on reality TV, where you prefer to see there's a lot of outstanding families in agriculture you'd like to see, and I know they're very salacious and they draw a lot of attention.
It's good TV. If you're a network like Bravo and it's on Peacock, like, they're the people who've got the Real Housewives and they've got Survivor and The Bachelor and all the reality TV. And so in your head, you're like, I want to make the most entertaining TV show possible. If anyone's listening from any of those networks, we can make really entertaining, fun drama here too. We'll just have to fake it all like they usually do on reality TV. We can stage some fist fights. We can throw some wrenches. Like we could make it entertaining.
I don't know. I've seen some workers here over the years that would make it pretty entertaining for you. Not any right now though. It's pretty low key around here.
That's good. Yeah, we could tell some stories maybe later. One of our viewers said, 2026 is going to be a tough year for everyone. What non-traditional practices can I do, for example, with 60-inch spacing or interplanting? Oh, funny you should ask. That's kind of like not the project I'm specifically working on, but the farmer I am working with to plant my wheat crop this year. He's big on relay cropping and intercropping, so I am farming the strips in between a large portion of corn. We're putting some cover in there. So when you say non-traditional practices, if we're talking wide spacing, we'll talk about this a little more when we watch that Jason Mock clip too. Like, there's a lot of money to be made, I think, in the relay cropping and intercropping space if you are set up to do corn and then beans after, or some form of wheat somewhere in there, or you can integrate livestock into it, because yes, you can grow a larger crop per plant from intercropping or relay cropping because of the extra sunlight, extra root space, all that stuff. But if you want to make your money back as an acre whole, I think there's going to have to be some sort of livestock integration. So the farmer I'm working with, we were actually talking on Monday of hey, what would it look like to bring some livestock, specifically cattle or sheep, with either GPS collars or electric fences in after we harvest all this corn to graze some of the wheat that will be left over in some of our interseeded areas. We'll harvest all the strips and anything that we can get after the corn, but there will be a lot left over that could be grazed, and we'd rather cattle have it and we have a grazing lease than hypothetically the deer and raccoons get to eat it all winter. So that's what I know. There's a lot of people way smarter than me out there. There's a guy named Lauren Steinledge, look him up. He's been a really great proto mentor to me. We talk every once in a while. If I have a question about wheat in Iowa or anything like that, I give him a call. So, and Jason Mock is a guy who's on Twitter all the time. Just DM him. He is so into that stuff.
Yeah, he's got a lot of interesting trials over the years. There's a lot of farmers here in this end of the state that have experimented and actually, have transitioned part or all of their operation to that type of thing. I think you have to be really cognizant of logistics.
Yeah.
Because when you're bringing a combine to and from a field twice during a year, it just adds into money. So you got to make sure that you are definitely making more. Like if corn is your focus, you got to make sure that the corn is significantly better than it would be in just a monocrop situation.
Yes. Yeah, it comes so much down to management, and you kind of have to make that trade-off of I'm going to probably have to put more work per hour into the field than I would if I was just row cropping everything. But once again, it's about maximizing and utilizing that acre as much as possible versus making your ease of life as much as possible. If you're not going to go for scale and go for 10,000 acres, you need to come down and look at, okay, I have a few acres. How do I farm those the best way I possibly can or the most profitably? And so I did a whole video about this last week talking about, hey, you can do 10 acres really profitably. You just have to be really intentional with your either marketing, private contracts, or your practice to really make that work. Otherwise, you're going to have to make up for it and compete at scale with everyone else. So it can totally happen. But once again, you kind of have to make that trade-off as, do I want to spend a bunch of money on scale over the long term, or do I want to spend a bunch of money on practice in the long term? And right now, that's hard. I also feel like with robotics, it's going to get easier. Like as we move into an era in agriculture where I can have a 200-pound robot in the field versus a 20,000-pound tractor, I mean, there's a lot of cool things we can start doing there.
Yeah, I think that once you get into that realm, I think then the possibilities become, it opens possibilities a lot more. When you're trying to, say you're trying to put corn in a soybean field, and you need to actually be able to spoon feed that corn to get the maximum you can out of it. I think when robots get involved, it opens those possibilities up a ton. Versus when you're just trying to go out there with an applicator and, and manage your nitrogen for 4 or 5 trips a year.
Yeah. It's coming. There's going to be some cool things happening, but you gotta hold tight. So, all right. Just a reminder, the show is brought to you by Atlas Media. Atlas Media is your go-to for high-quality media and marketing material in the agriculture industry. They are our partner to make this all happen because Neil and I are business partners and we own the company. So go check us out. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any media needs, give us a call. Specifically, if you're an ag business, give us a call. All right, let's jump into some specialty markets. I thought this would be good for us to have a conversation about, mostly because specialty crops make up a big percentage of our industry, like a huge percentage of our industry. We just don't think about it. California and Florida and Georgia have some absolutely massive specialty crops that we just don't talk about that much. So the one that stuck out to me was specifically California's wine grape crush is the smallest it has been in decades. The crush of 2.6 million tons was down from 8.4% in 2024. That exceeded expectation, but still helps the industry move towards balance. California vintners are surprised by a 2025 preliminary wine grape crush estimate of over 2.6 million tons, which exceeds wine professionals' expectations, but the crush was still the state's smallest since 2.4 million tons produced in 1999. And the downsizing will help the industry begin to correct a chronic oversupply of grapes. The State Department of Food and Agriculture reports that last year's overall crush was likely to reach 2.76 million tons when including table and raisin grapes that were crushed to concentrate as well as wine. That represents a 6.2% drop from the 2024 crush of 2.6 million tons. As for grapes grown for wine, the most recent crush was down 8.4% from 2024, but an estimate by Agco, a global wine broker, of 2.4 million tons. The reason you could be that yields were higher than anticipated as farmers reported near perfect growing conditions throughout the season with no major heat events happening. I don't understand how any of this works. From what I understand, just from a high-level perspective, is that we have probably an oversupply of grapes that are affecting everything, probably much like an oversupply of everything else we have right now, and it's hard. It makes it hard for growers and producers, but we have to acknowledge maybe there's just too much of it, and that's why. And that from what that article says, that's what it sounds like.
You know, I think the wine industry is facing kind of an Armageddon similar to bourbon, where you know the younger generations aren't like Gen X and the Boomers, where they were just guzzling alcohol, and where I think nearly 30% of the Boomers and Gen Xers, actively drank. You're getting down to very low percentages of the latter generations, and because of that, there's just an oversupply of alcohol. I know here in Kentucky, it's been a major problem. Our
I don't want
bourbon.
to be that guy, but I definitely had a non-alcoholic beer a few weeks ago, and I didn't notice any difference in the taste or quality other than the fact I didn't feel anything.
Yeah, I noticed Heineken has a premium non-alcoholic product now. I mean, they're addressing those concerns with the industry.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like there's always going to be a culture of I want to have a beverage in my hand when I'm
Sure.
socially, like the only time I drink is when I go do things. Like we don't have beer in our fridge. Maybe Laura and I have a bottle of wine in the fridge every once in a while, but most of the time it's just, hey, we're out with friends or I'm getting dinner with someone and I'll grab a beer. But with how much I run and I train, it's just not a part of my diet. And so when I do, I'm like, I just have a non-alcoholic one. I don't know. So I'm a little weird like that. I know that, but
I think that's just the younger generations are they're very focused on health, and because of that, alcohol is
weed. It could also be weed.
It could be weed. Mitch McConnell seems to think it possibly is.
I feel like I don't. There's dispensaries everywhere, but like how much? I feel like I don't know how many people.
I still think that's a very low percentage too. I think it's just mostly people are very, as time goes on and people realize how detrimental things other than healthy food are to your health long term.
Yeah, people will cut out literally everything, but the just crap processed food they buy pretty much everywhere.
Yeah,
I think that it is a trend changing, but even then, like Spencer, if you're watching this, sorry, we were on the phone before I came over here, and I was like, hey, like, like even Spencer's like, I don't really care that much about like the process or the quality. He's looking at that calorie label, and Spencer's in shape. If you've seen Spencer, he's in good shape, but he's just all he thinks about is like the calories. It's like he doesn't care about any of the chemicals in it. He doesn't care. He's just calories, protein, and carbs. That's all he really looks at in the label. And I'm like, you ever look at like the ingredients? Like, you ever see what's in all this stuff? Like, white monsters, don't look at the ingredient label, bro. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about peanuts.
So the Peanut Board is investing in peanut allergy research and how to help.
Yeah. This is interesting because from a lobbying perspective, and I'll just pull up the article here. From a lobbying perspective, I think this is like a great move because, if you're the Peanut Association or the Peanut Board, you're thinking, oh, like, how do we increase demand? Well, how about we meet our consumers where they're at and help solve the problem? So, Farm Progress supports the National Peanut Board is taking bold action against one of parents' most feared diagnoses, peanut allergies. The organization representing U.S. peanut farmers has committed $2.5 million over 5 years to the food and allergy research and education, specifically targeting their innovative mind meld initiative. That is a weird mind meld. That's weird. The mind meld approach isn't starting from scratch. It was developed by FAIR CEO Sung Publit, who previously led Stand Up to Cancer, an organization that revolutionized cancer research by breaking down competitive barriers between scientific teams and forcing collaboration. Good old science, forced collaboration. This same collaborative model is now being applied to food allergies, which affects more than 33 million Americans. The research focuses on retraining the immune system to stop treating food proteins as threats, essentially reverse engineering the most important advances made in oncology resource. So I thought this was interesting because I feel like our industry isn't really like, specifically when we come to row crops, when the consumer complains about something, our first thing is to criticize them for not being educated. Like, we never seem to take maybe we could help, maybe we could research things. Is the Peanut Board concerned that this is going to hurt demand for their constituents? Absolutely. But there's also the play of like, hey, we need to get behind this because there could be a part of like, hey, maybe the modern peanut varieties are causing some part of this. I'm not saying I know nothing about peanuts, but I'm just saying when it comes to gluten intolerance or things like that, hey, maybe we're having an effect in that. So I think it's a cool move from the peanut board to commit to something like this. And I would love for some of the other commodity organizations to think about using some of their checkoff dollars for more consumer focused research that could help consumers first instead of going to bat to defend themselves or spending on an advertising campaign. Like, could we help meet consumers' need with these checkoff dollars? Because at the end of the day, consumers are actually the ones driving demand, and we shouldn't be fighting with them all the time.
I think one of the biggest problems right now in agriculture is the producer and the industry not trying to meet the consumer's needs actively. And that's one of the reasons we're in the problems we're in right now. If we begin to address those consumer needs, like we know gluten is an issue for a big portion of Americans that are gluten intolerant or celiac even. Like if we began to, find additional crops that would address that situation for those Americans. So, currently some of that stuff is being imported, like from other countries, like ancient grains, and that is a problem that we're not addressing as farmers and as industry leaders. And I think going forward, that's something we need to look at. And if some of our acres transition to some of those heritage grains, and I know it's a difficult transition for a traditional farmer, but if we looked at ways that we could start to begin to transition some of our acres out of the traditional model that just feeds, cows, pigs, and processed food, and into the more heritage type grain where we could address those concerns with our consumers, I think it would take us. It would definitely help us get out of the situation that we're currently in.
Yeah, it wouldn't solve all our problems, but we need to have that mindset. We'll talk about this later. There was another article, it might have been by Purdue, but like the food is health revolution and the MAHA movement has the potential to add billions of dollars to our industry, and it is up for grabs right now. And the sad part is it's the food is health movement and the MAHA movement. The people who are capturing that value is not the farmers. Once again, it's the big food companies, or it's small startup food companies that will eventually get bought out by the big food companies. Like I think Poppy Soda is like the great example of that.
Sure.
Like it was this probiotic soda. It scaled to billions in revenue super quickly. PepsiCo bought them up like that, and it's like, okay, well that's gonna be bad for you in 3 years. But it's marketed really well, and a bunch of people got behind the idea of, oh, it's this probiotic soda. It tastes good and it's better for my stomach. I love this. This is exciting. But at the end of the day, what happened? Well, all that money ends up in PepsiCo's pocket compared to everyone else's, and that happens time and time and time again. Like there's this conference called, I think it's called Expo West, and I wanted to go to it this year and I didn't. Expo West is like this big CPG brand. It's about the health food movement. It kind of was started by some like the more like health friendly organic CPG brands, all those things. And I think I know 2 farmers who went there. It was probably Johnny, Castor River, and the 3 farm daughters. I think those are probably the only ones who went. It's like, why aren't there more farmers represented at the biggest health foods expo in the country, if not the world?
I think it's such a difficult transition for a traditional farmer to make, just because right now there is no market to sell into, so you have to develop your own market. And when you're already in a difficult financial situation, it's very difficult to allocate resources or additional labor to a market that is not developed yet. So you have to build the market up. And, people, I think, have been reluctant to start on a very small scale and work off that small scale into a business model that would work. And because of those reasons, you see them not doing it.
And we expect the industry to be responsible for market development. Like we all look at everyone else around us. Like the big thing that specifically the corn and soy boards are always talking about: market development, market development, market development. That's all they're ever talking about. That's why you are hearing so much about E15 and biofuels right now, because they're market development, market development, market development. It's like, okay, cool, but like you guys have been taking 10 years to do this. The market has not been developed yet. Like something needs to change if we're expecting some large scale change in our industry. And like you said, it was like it should start with, hey, I'm gonna take 5 acres and put it aside, and we're gonna have to try things. We need to be experimenting with those things.
Yeah, I really think it has to come down to the producer level, and the producer has to develop the market and has to be, really has to just think way outside the box versus what the traditional producer has been willing to do. And and I think we will start to see that if we continue to experience down markets. And I think you're already seeing some of it, but you'll see it expand more with continued down markets just because people get so discouraged in this model that they feel like they need a way out. And so, it just forces them into that position where they have to try something different than what they've been trying.
And but it's just sad that it's necessity forcing that. I guess from the innovator's mindset, I'm just thinking is like, and I mean, I guess we can't really say anything different because we had an awful year last year, much like most of the farmers in the U.S. And it's like, okay, what's it doing? It's forcing us to like get on our toes and innovate. Like we have no options, but we are backs against the wall to continue to try and innovate and try new things. And yeah, we'll talk about some things about some farm bankruptcies later. There's some interesting stats.
What do they always say? Necessity is the mother of invention.
I think that's the one I was talking about. I think I quoted it last week, but that's true. Like necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah, I think it's so true, and I and that is, I feel like that is the one positive thing that we see from these down, continually down large commodity markets is it's forcing people to look at alternative options. And it also, we've talked about this on here before too, or maybe not on this particular show, but just in some of our videos where, like, whenever you're experiencing large-scale, long-term downturns, it makes you a better financial manager. It makes you look at alternative ways to take your farm or business. And during those tough, cycles, it builds your confidence when you make it through it, and it also builds innovation where you've learned new skills, and then whenever things do start to cycle back up, you can continue that upward trajectory that you learned during that downturn in the economy.
Yeah, something that like precision planting did really well, and I'm bringing this up because I listened to a podcast on the way down here, is precision planting specifically looked at the equipment cycle and the commodity cycle and said, hey, we need to plan our spend around this cycle, and specifically the research spend on it, of saying, hey, we're going to actually underspend on good years, knowing that the bad years are coming and that we should be able to keep investing in R&D during that time. So when we are looking at the industry as a whole, why are we not planning for more, cyclical markets? Why aren't we planning that into our, farm operation? Why aren't we planning that into our business operations? Why are we, when things are really good, we are so over investing and spending as much capital as possible to keep growing, even though we know we're going to have to curtail expenses in 5 to 6 years? I think it's just an interesting conversation to have, and I think we could all learn a little bit from that of like, how do we, as an industry as a whole, move towards better cyclical planning, knowing that there's going to be ups and downs.
I think that's something you learn with experience. The older guys that have been through the tough economic times over and over again through the years are a lot more conservative than the new guys that haven't, especially if they come into the industry in a bull cycle. It's very difficult for them to think that there is going to be a downtime, and because of that, that just comes with experience, and then some people can experience it multiple times and never learn the pattern. But I think as producers, that's something we got to look at really hard, is realizing that even if the market does cycle back up, it's definitely going to cycle back down, because that's just the nature of markets.
Yeah, that's every market. It goes up, it goes down. Sometimes it goes down really bad, and sometimes it goes up really good.
Yep.
That's just a cycle.
Well, usually the longer the bull market is, on the reverse side, the longer the down market will be, or the bear market.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's talk about everybody's favorite equipment, Agco earnings. Agco's earnings reports came out a few weeks ago, and a lot of it was done at an institutional investor conference. So I just had the transcript from this, fed it into AI, and had it transcribe it for us. I'm always very bullish on Agco just because I think if there's a company that stands a chance at giving John Deere a run for its money, it's going to be Agco. Like they're the ones willing to invest to go to bat compared to, CNH as a parent company. So financial and strategic targets for Agco. Agco aims to increase its mid-cycle operating margins from 7.7% to a range of 14 to 15% by 2029. This growth is driven by 4 key buckets. Market recovery. Basically, they hope that the market as a whole recovers. Portfolio transformation, adding the high-margin PTx Trimble joint venture while divesting the low-margin grain and protein business. Agco sold off GSI last year or 2 years ago because it's a very low-margin business. Everyone can build bins. That's just a bunch of steel. There's some cool tech in there, but more or less the bin companies have become very commoditized as steel has been commoditized. They acquired a bulk share in Trimble's Ag division, so that's like 80% of Trimble Ag, and now it's PTx Trimble. Kind of the same deal that John Deere's going for is, hey, let's make sure we have a really good software stack that is going to be more consistent, highly profitable revenue even in down years. Cost savings, achieving $200 million in annual run rate savings through restructuring and AI integration. All I hear there is, hey, we're going to probably reorganize our factories and lay off some people. Unfortunately, not sure that's what's happening, but in expanding the Fendt brand globally, growing the parts business, and scaling the PTx Trimble division. Regional dynamics, Europe is still 60% of the business. North America is Agco's biggest growth opportunity. The company is gaining share by positioning Fendt as a fuel-efficient, high-tech alternative to incumbents. I love how they never talk about competitors. All the big companies, they never talk about the other guy. They only talk about themselves and then the other guys. It's so funny. And then South America, while they're currently challenged by low commodity prices as well and a lack of subsidies, Agco sees long-term potential in the Cerrado region, where Fendt's high-efficiency machines fit large-scale multi-planting operations. Agco has differentiated itself through innovative two-service models, PTx precision technology. Unlike competitors who focus primarily on new equipment, Agco leads in the retrofit market. I would agree with that. I wouldn't say Agco leads. I would say Precision leads, and Agco owns them. This allows farmers to bolt on advanced tech like targeting spraying to existing machinery of any brand, and FarmerCore, a mobile-first service model. Instead of requiring farmers to bring equipment to a brick-and-mortar dealership, Agco uses mobile trucks to perform 85% of repairs on farm. I do think that's a big one. I know Deere and Case are both catching on to it, but I know specifically like in this region, Ag Revolution was like, we don't need to build stores, but we do need to buy a bunch of service trucks. And so I remember one of the first photos I saw of Ag Revolution, which is one of Agco's dealers, is a picture of one location and like 30 service trucks. And I was like, that's how it's done. It's just a bunch of service trucks that can service a wide variety of regions, and then just have parts guys who can run parts. It takes a long time to build stores. It costs a lot of money. You're just basically building floor space. Like that's all it is. It's a giant floor space to park machinery and have a shop. But you can probably do you can do 90% of the repairs on any machine outside of a shop if you need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this company, they have those two hugely important building blocks. That Gold Star warranty that Fendt's offering, I think that is an innovative offering that that none of the other competitors are offering. And
I bet you they're coming. They're all going to figure something out.
I wouldn't doubt it, because that is like when they're even offering filter changes and oil changes.
That's
along
thousands
with
and thousands of dollars.
I mean, it really is. I mean, it gets into a large amount of money, and and then I think Deere is kind of a equipment manufacturer, but they're kind of they've become a data software company, and I think that Agco and Case have looked at that and been like, hey, I see where they were going with that model now, because it's a lot cheaper to build a software platform once and then sell it thousands of times versus selling hugely expensive metal, equipment over and over again. It's just a great model to be highly profitable.
And we talked about it. Like the commoditization of the equipment market is coming, where every tractor is going to do the exact same thing. All the tractors actually already do the exact same thing. Like, explain to me what your brand new John Deere does differently than a Fendt.
Yeah, I mean,
how it integrates with the technology,
sure,
which you can add on later anyways.
Yeah,
exactly. So like, and that's the thing is like if you're a tractor company, you're thinking, okay, the cost of production of tractors will continue to be driven down because everyone's gonna be able to make the same machine that does the same thing and offer a competitive price. Like that's gonna happen. So we need to make sure that our tech stack that people pay for consistently is better than the competitor, or at least on par. So that way, you know, you can have your little features. And I think, you know, we talk about this a lot. Agco just needs to not let precision planting become corporatized too bad. Like precision planting has done so much for the industry in a positive way, and like I think they're on like 60 to 70% of farms in the U.S., which is like a big deal. For like 60 to 70% of the farms is a lot of farms, and that's a lot of. I think it was like you have precision planting on some of your stuff, right?
I had precision planting.
Got rid of it. It sucked bad. I do remember.
No, I think I think they do make a good product.
Yeah.
It's just most of my stuff is deer now.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right, you want to talk about the
so we
our
see
old favorite companies.
Yeah, so Kinsey is getting into the military industry. That just proves how bad farming is. Let's open that article up. It says John Kinzenbaugh and Howard Buffett team up to build demining machines for the Ukraine fields. This is an article by Successful Farming. It says it's been 4 years since Russia
Check out that photo. Look at the photo on the top of the article.
Yeah, it's a dozer pulling that.
A Kinsey machine. It's blowing up a landmine.
It's pretty nuts, isn't it?
Could you imagine being the guy in that bulldozer?
Yeah, I mean, how would you like to be driving that bulldozer?
Dude, it's gotta hurt. Like that sort of explosion. I told you about that house.
They got to be wearing helmets in there.
I told you about that house that blew up like
Oh
probably a mile
yeah,
away
a
from
couple
us.
blocks away.
It shook. I thought our water or our furnace exploded. Like being that close to an explosion has to do some major internal damage.
It's always shocking to me, those big explosions, and how much they can tear up.
Yeah.
It says it's been 4 years since Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and in February 2022, the two countries are entering the fifth year of fighting. One result of the war and one of the most daunting challenges facing farmers in the region is the presence of thousands of landmines, including anti-personnel and anti-tank mines buried in their fields. Can you imagine planning through a field and a landmine going off?
I'm just thinking like the tractor misses it, and then all of a sudden your planter's like in the air. I say that with a chuckle because it'd be funny to see like in the moment that would actually like really suck.
You know,
really
I'll be like texting on my cell phone or not paying, you know, about half dozing and hit a ditch, you know, and it like takes me to the top of the cab. I can't imagine hitting a landmine.
I bet you some of that stuff shatters windows and yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a bummer. During Russia's initial invasion, they left mines behind as they retreated, and as Russia's occupy more of Ukraine's farmland, Ukraine has used mines to slow down their advance. And humanitarian Howard Buffett has visited Ukraine 24 times in the past 4 years and spent 300 days there. 97 of those were near the contact line where fighting was nearby. He's seen the devastation firsthand. He said, quote, "Still, I'm amazed at how resilient Ukrainian farmers are," said Buffett, chairman and CEO of Howard Buffett Foundation and farmer in Illinois and Nebraska. Many Ukraine farmers can't replace equipment destroyed in the war because they still owe money on that equipment. Buffett said that the war had also caused farm labor shortages, as many Ukrainian men and women have left their farms to fight and protect their freedom. Whatever problem I've ever faced on my farm, it doesn't come close to what Ukrainian farmers are facing.
Dang,
I mean,
that's crazy.
It really is crazy. You know, like when you look at the amount of death and destruction on both sides of that war, on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, it is absolutely heartbreaking. You hope that there's a speedy end to that.
It's been 5 years already.
I really cannot. I mean,
like, when you hear that out loud, it makes me worry about this Iran thing because it's like we all thought we all thought that this, the Ukraine thing is like, oh, it'll blow over in 9 months and it'll be a thing. We all thought that was going to happen, and now we're kind of here. And
I think I remember when Rumsfeld, was invading Baghdad, and he said this will last 6 weeks, and 10 years later we are still in Iraq.
We can't keep don't say things like that.
I just hope we don't. I hope that doesn't happen in Iran. But I mean, it's very difficult to wind a war down once it gets started.
Yeah, and there's money to be made, and that's the sad part. All right, machinery update 326, new tractors across the board. Okay, so the last time we were here, we talked about the potential for John Deere's new John Deere 540. It came out. It was pretty cool. But there are some other machines that have come out as well that got completely overshadowed by Deere's media firestorm. So obviously right here we have the 540. New Holland and Case both came out with some mid-range tractors. We did a video on the Optimum at the Commodity Classic, and it was pretty cool. I think it's a pretty neat machine. I'm interested to see how it fits in the market. I think you talked to one of the guys. He said they built a lot of it for like the dairy market, some of that like high-speed road machine. Let's see.
I think that was kind of their thoughts behind it was,
front axle suspension, smoother ride, 12,000-pound lift capacity on a front hitch. Ooh, front hitch, nice. Wow, yeah. So John Deere's tractor. Fendt came out with some updates to their tractors. I believe they just have some newer engines in them. Yeah, by a new Agco Power Core 80 8-liter engine designed to maintain high torque at low RPMs for low fuel consumption. The Fendt 800 Vario is a higher horsepower tractor that allows us to be even more effective in some areas of the row crop market. And then the 9S got some technology updates. And yeah, so just some model year updates, compact tractors. I don't think there's much to see here. Fendt's got their electric little tractor that came out a while ago. Kinsey's got a 22-inch row spacing. Precision Planting came out with that new seed tube that like angles the seed upright in the ground, which I think is quite interesting. So, yeah. Anything here stick out to you?
No, I did see when I was at the Louisville Farm Show, I really noticed that there was a big focus on small tractors.
Yeah.
I think that that's going to be all the push going forward. The big machines are so expensive. It's so difficult for somebody to buy one, even in a used situation, just because they require so much capital. That going forward, there is probably going to, especially as automation happens, there's going to be a move from the large equipment into multiple smaller units.
Yeah, and that's kind of been our mindset behind this new farm we're starting. We don't want to buy iron until we absolutely have to, but we'll do a video on it at some point. But the tractor that we'll be using to plant the farm in Iowa is a 6 Series John Deere with a front hitch, with front hydraulics, imported from Europe with the intention of like, hey, this is meant to be a very innovative machine. So just a reminder, this show is brought to you by Atlas Media. Atlas Media is your go-to for high-quality media and marketing material in the agriculture industry. Brazil trip, one of our commenters asked. At some point, yes, we would love to do a Brazil trip. Oh, it's Renato. Hi, Renato. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, we definitely want to go to Brazil. So Brazil is adding more acres.
Yeah, I think that actually transitions really well. Thanks for commenting, Brazil. Brazil adding more acres, ? Brazilian land potential could disrupt global markets while soybean supply may be limited in the short run. It could increase in the long run with the potential for 70 million additional acres of converted pasture land in Brazil. Okay, so this is the editor's note. This story is in response to a recent article about potential Brazilian cropland conversion. It is titled, Will Brazil See a Land Conversion Bonanza? And it ran online on January 26th and in March 6th print issue of the Indiana Prairie Farmer. History is awash with examples of buyers seeking alternative suppliers when trade disruptions cause buyers to perceive their existing suppliers as unreliable. In 1973, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries embargoed oil exports from the United States in response to the United States helping Israel in war. Gasoline prices skyrocketed. How did we respond? We labeled OPEC as unreliable suppliers. We sought alternative supplies. Farmers built on-farm ethanol plants called gasohol back then. My cornfield is your oil well bumper stickers sprouted up on pickup trucks. Now around a third of the U.S. corn crop goes to ethanol. China is acting rationally. They're seeking alternative sources in response to supply disruption just like we did. Brazilian land potential. Brazil has a huge untapped potential production, as noted in Indiana Prairie Farmer's article. Brazil may be well positioned to supply soybeans to both China and its previously existing customers. Brazil's growing dependence on one major market carries a risk of losing a piece of that market. We face that same risk. Maybe the strategy for Brazilians is to take advantage of it until disruption occurs. Brazil does not have the rural transportation infrastructure that the rural U.S. has. Those 7 million acres that Brazil might shift to crop production do not have a grid of roads on section lines. That is a mixed blessing. Getting crops to market is more challenging, but Brazil's total investment and maintenance costs of rural transportation infrastructure per hectare of cropland is relatively low and will stay relatively low. That means Brazil will need relatively less tax revenue to finance rural roads. So the summary of that whole article is basically there is grazing land in Brazil that could be put into crop production one day. It's not saying that's going to happen, but 70 million acres is a lot of acres. And if the trend continues that we've seen in the U.S. of grazing acres going into crop production, why would Brazil not do that? So I'm curious we really want to go down there. I think it is interesting to see what could happen. It's all about market development. Renato's commenting, I would add that the current government in Brazil is not too friendly with agriculture, so they're doing everything they can to stop that from happening. Some will happen, but it's at a low rate. So yeah, and this is all a hypothetical. Could that happen? So I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. I'm not saying 70 million acres will go into production, but I do think this does come down to the conversation of we as U.S. producers should be thinking about, hey, there is more competition in South America that can come online. Like we have not seen Brazil's full acres yet, and we're continuing to see a decline in U.S. acres. We are continuing to see low prices. We have rough trade relations with a lot of the same countries that are buying Brazil's crops. So I don't have much more to say on this because we talk about this all the time. U.S. farmers should be considering things that are not corn and soybeans in their rotation, not because they're bad crops, but because we are going to, as the markets continue to get supplied, we're going to continue to see some downward pressure on prices. And Brazil faces all those challenges, but it's a lot. I just hear stories of the massive farms down there. It's like, man, they've got a lot more acres to make up for that than a lot of the small farmers in the U.S. do. I mean, yeah.
They can grow 2 crops a year. I mean, that's just
3 in some regions.
Yeah, in some regions 3. So, I mean, it is when you look at that number. I mean, even if just a small percentage of those acres were transitioned to row crop, it just adds fuel to the ongoing problem.
Yeah, and yeah. Were you saying our industry has problems, Neil?
Like another 10 million acres of corn. That's with an additional soybean crop.
Listen, here's the thing about 10 million acres of corn is it's probably just a USDA estimate gone wrong.
That's probably true.
All right, this is one I love to talk about, and I've known this is I've heard about this for a while. Let me see if I can reposition our screen a little. Fertilizer producers fixed prices lawsuit claims. I've never thought that before. A class action lawsuit filed Friday alleges that major U.S. manufacturers of fertilizer have conspired since 2021 to raise fertilizer prices and keep them high. When prices for an essential input are artificially inflated, the impact falls squarely on farmers and ripples across the food system. This case is about restoring competition in a market that is foundational to American agriculture. Greg Osceola, partner and chair of DeCello Levitt's antitrust and competition litigation practice, said in a news release. The defendants include Mosaic, Nutrien, CF Industries, and Koch Agronomic Services, Yara International, and Canpotex. The lawsuit sorts the companies into nitrogen defendants and potash defendants and phosphorus defendants. Union Line Farms of Hopkins, Iowa is the sole plaintiff at this point. The lawsuit filed Friday is the second such complaint in the past week. A New York farm filed similar action last week in federal court in Illinois. If approved by the court, the class would include anyone who bought NPK fertilizer since January of 2021, which is the entire crop industry.
In the past week, we saw Josh Hawley, write an open letter to the fertilizer producers saying basically that they were price gouging. And I think that's just more of that. You're seeing now, we've seen a couple of small scale Congress investigations into it. And I think, where there's smoke, there's fire. They've definitely taken advantage of the amount or the market monopoly that they have.
Yeah.
And, that just shows you that that additional supplies are needed from additional producers.
Yeah, but it also says to the point of we've given these companies so much power. We continue, Did you buy fertilizer from one of those companies this year?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the market monopolies are too large. I mean, they don't have enough competition in the space. And, I think that a very easy way to fix that would be to bust those monopolies up. And I think that's hard to do because at this point, they've gotten so powerful,
Yeah. Well, I know Nutrien has a suit against them in Canada as well for the same things. So something will happen for sure, but what's going to happen is if it gets brought into court, it'll probably make its way up to some high levels. Specifically, I'm not saying it'll go to Supreme Court levels, but I'm saying there will probably be a national defense case made for it. There will be these companies are too crucial for national defense, so we're going to set profit caps on them hypothetically, because there have been government condoned monopolies in the past. Like I know specifically International Harvester at one point was allowed to have a monopoly. I believe there was some regulation on their profit caps, and same with AT&T back when it was the Bell telephone system. They were deemed important enough for national security and the health of the nation that, hey, you guys can stay a monopoly, just don't make too much money off of it. That's basically what I assume will happen is, hey, if you are doing business in the U.S., that's fine. You have a 25% profit cap on any of your products.
Right. They have like a commission that regulates them,
Yeah.
And I would just prefer to see them broke up, and that way they have competing, they have competing interest, and it drives the cost of the product down.
Yeah. I just don't know if I see it happening.
Maybe not. Too much money.
They own the mines. Like if you own the mines, like
yeah.
Are you going to really make them divest
Sure.
the mines? So.
Yeah.
All right. Just a reminder, this show is brought to you by Atlas Media, the company Neil and I run to make this all happen. We appreciate you all watching. If you guys need any high-quality photo video work, or if you don't want high-quality video work, but you want this stuff to keep happening, make sure you share this with your friends, share it with your family, share it with other farmers, because we love doing this. We are going to try to do this again next week. So don't worry, the show's not over. Just letting you know that. All right. So once again, I had a long drive down here the other day, and I just got thinking about what does disruption in agriculture look like. We talk about these monopolies. We talk about how basically fertilizer is completely monopolized. The biological space is claiming to be the disruptor, but really they're just input companies with a different disguise. I'm not saying they don't work. I'm not saying they all don't work. I think, I know Renato is watching this. He's one of our customers. I think Spraytech's products work. And they won't call themselves biologicals. I think their products work, and I think they have a potential to be a disruptor in agriculture. But when was the last time we really saw some disruption in our industry? When was the last time our industry got shook up by someone who came on the field? Meristem was I thought for a while, but I heard there's some stuff going on. And the last one I can really think of is the last one people were like, oh, this is good stuff, was Precision Planting. That's the last company I could think of talking in our industry is oh, they provided reasonable competition for big companies and changed the way other companies operated.
I think the only one I can think of in my career that spans nearly 30 years that was a major disruptor was Kinsey.
Yeah.
When they came with that planter that rotated on its post. I mean, that was a major market disruptor where John Deere had a big, or maybe the monopoly on the planting market at the time. And John Kinseball came with a rotating planter that was easy to transport. And when he did, it totally changed the planting industry. And I mean, there was a time here in Kentucky when, I don't know, I would say 80% of the farmers were operating Kinsey planters. And that time has passed now.
I can't tell you the last time I saw a Kinsey planter.
Yeah, there's not many left. I mean, there's still a few. But that was the last large-scale disruption I saw in the ag market. So he was an innovator. Still innovating.
I think he's still doing good stuff.
Yeah.
I just think, they lost that lawsuit with Deere a few years ago, and they had that one big planter issue, and also the planting space has gotten so competitive. It's hard to be competitive.
It really is.
I think for a long time, you could say Kinsey that. I really look at Precision Planting and the stuff they've done. Any company making on to 60+% of the farms is a good company. The problem that I think Precision faces in the future now is that Deere's technology is caught up. We took apart the high-speed planter yesterday, and it's this is it. This is just as good as everyone else's. And so planting technology as a whole has kind of all caught up, and Deere's probably still has a big play. Precision's on all of I think Case's planters, Agco's planters. So Precision is still in a really good spot, but looking at the market, it's hey, Ag Leader and Kinsey brought their product to market, and I believe they're allowed to keep it on market just with some caveats and things like that. So like all the companies are playing in the same playing field now. So now it's a question of what's next? Like, what is the next disruptor in our industry? Is it the robot companies?
Yes, I feel like that's where I was going with it. Is I feel like autonomy, whoever comes with autonomy first, and then robots that actually work in the field. You know, I think drones have, have tried, but I think they're still, they're still pretty rudimentary. They don't have, they haven't streamline their process
Yeah,
enough.
they're not automated enough process-wise
Yep.
to replace the sprayer.
Yeah, because they're so labor intensive. You know, that's why I've been very reluctant to bring one on this farm, because I just feel like I can't generate enough labor to go about my day-to-day operations plus run a drone. I don't have enough labor capacity to do both. And so because of that, I haven't ever brought a drone on.
So question, should the right guy in the area has that set up, hire the drone over your aerial applicator? Because you usually hire a crop duster to come out with either a helicopter or a plane, right?
You know, I'm an aerial applicator guy. I'm just kind of old school. I'm not that I hate the drone or that I think that the drone doesn't have a place in agriculture, but I'm nostalgic in the fact that I love the aerial applicators. I love the bravado that they have.
They're the cowboys.
They are, and hey, they can. It's amazing how many acres they can do in a day. And so, I can have one here on my farm for 3 or 4 days. He can get over my entire crop and be gone. And so, because of that, I'm very reluctant to let go of that.
Do you think there will come a day though when you do let go of that?
Yeah, I think there. I hope there isn't, but I can see that yes, drones are beginning to get big. And I know that there's a huge risk involved with those guys that are, that are using their talents to spray these fields. And I think at some point, the risk outweighs the reward, especially if there is a drone large enough to do the same amount of acres that a current aerial applicator can.
But I don't even think it's the size. I don't think it's the size. I think it's what we're talking about is like the future of autonomy, unless you're farming at 10,000 acres, 20,000 acres, is going to be I have 10 to 15 machines instead of I have one. Because like the aerial applicators are great because you're covering such a wide, like you can cover a lot really quickly, but you can cover just as much quickly with 10 drones. The problem is the infrastructure and the way the drones are built still haven't gotten to the point where it's like, I envision a future where you have 5 drones, you got the trailer, you pull up, it's got all the liquid, it's got all the batteries, it comes, it lands, it auto swaps out batteries, it auto reloads, and you're just sitting there monitoring the situation, and you have 5 of them going at once.
Yeah, I can see, like, when we're talking about drone swarms and we have autonomy where it's coming in, recharging, refilling, and then taking back off, and you're not using man labor to do it. Yeah, I can see a place where that will change. That will revolutionize the spraying industry when that happens.
It's not there for the large stuff, but like DJI already has a drone that has a little box that you keep plugged in or it runs off a battery, and the drone can do automated flight pass. And so you can get one for crop scouting right now that you leave at the corner of a field. It flies out at a preset time, it's got one of the multispectral cameras on it, so it's taking all your data in, it's doing that all. It comes and lands again, and it uploads all your data, and then 24 hours later, it does the exact same thing again. Like, there could be a world where the technology is there. It just needs to be made bigger and easier to work on. So all we're waiting for now is that to scale in terms of size for the bigger drones, but also the terms of scale in terms of can we bring cost down on the per unit machine, so that way. But even then, like, how much is a sprayer right now? $700,000?
Oh yeah,
$700,000 for a sprayer. You can buy some drones for $50,000. Okay, how many drones can you buy for $50,000, $700,000? Let me do the math. That's what, 14 drones?
Yeah.
14 drones. Obviously, you got to throw in tax. You probably need to buy a trailer and buy a bunch of batteries, things like that. So let's say you buy 10 drones for the same price. All we need is some like better refill and systems for that to be a competitive option. If you could have one guy running a trailer with 10 drones, or 2 guys even with one drone, and just, I can see it happening.
Yeah, I can see that happening. I think the other major innovations we could see are robot weeders, especially if we start to see more pesticide bans. And I think that would be a large revolution of the market where we're eliminating chemical companies and use of chemicals, and then moving to laser weeders and
Let me pull up some news
electric
articles.
weeders and then robot weeders.
So I didn't put these in the articles that we were going over today. Paraquat from Syngenta, done.
Yeah.
70 countries, paraquat's done being produced by them, which is funny because I had a commenter who was commented in one of my videos about the wheat we're doing. He said, just throw some paraquat in there. I was like, I'm not stepping within 10 foot of that. I was
No,
like, we got an old folks home 200 feet away.
I've used paraquat in my career, and, I've suffered health consequences for it. And, that's one thing that never comes on my farm anymore. I don't want it here. I don't want to use it on my land. No.
And then chemical giant Corteva. This is from The Guardian. Chemical giant Corteva will stop producing Enlist Duo, an herbicide considered to be among the most dangerous still used in the U.S. by environmentalists because it contains an active ingredient in Agent Orange and glyphosate.
Oh, nice.
So, which have both been linked to cancer and widespread ecological damage. And we didn't talk about this. I can pull up that. Let me see if I can find that Instagram link.
I keep
guys.
coming.
I think Roundup causes cancer, and I'm just ready to say it. I'm ready to say it. Like
You know-
even if it doesn't technically, the odds are now like something is going to happen.
I keep coming back to, if we were to take the chemicals out of agriculture, yes, I know it would be a pain in the butt, and we would have to come up with some alternatives very fast or lose our crop to noxious weeds. But it would definitely limit our supply, and it would make our supply chains a lot healthier.
It would. Okay. So I'm going to show a graph just based on that. I wasn't planning to do this in this segment. Okay, let me see if I can zoom this out a little bit. Okay, so this is something I saw from Instagram. Also, take this all with a massive grain of salt. It's from social media. It could be totally wrong. Okay, so this is cancers in the U.S. So cancer, like record number of cancer treatments, where cancer's popping up. Okay, so this is obviously dark bad. We don't want dark. That means lots of cancer. All right, next slide. Glyphosate heaven. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's like almost there. Oh, wrong one. I'm not saying it's like for sure almost there, but between that and that, like, it's pretty.
It
close.
overlays pretty closely.
It looks really bad. It makes us look really bad. So, am I saying that glyphosate for sure causes cancer? I am not saying. I cannot tell you for a scientific fact that it does. I don't care about the scientific fact anymore. I care that we as an industry won't even listen, and I care that we are at this point where no matter how much Bayer lobbies, they have a whole Science is Truth campaign. There are people in agriculture, people I know being paid by Bayer right now to spout this Science is Truth, like, hey, we did an internal study things. What I care about is the fact that the consumer population has decided that they do not want Roundup on their food, and they think it is giving us cancer. At the end of the day, no matter how much, it would take so much science lobbying to make us be convinced that, like, not us, I mean, maybe us, the population at large, that it is not having a negative effect on us.
I think it's done such a negative. It's had such a negative effect on the public perception of the U.S. farmer.
Yes.
That I'm at the point where I'm ready to just pitch it out. Not only that, just all chemicals. I mean, I'm at the point in my career when I've sold as much $4 corn and $10 soybeans as I want to sell, and I'm ready to see chemicals go out the window. Us retain
Renato's
that.
watching this, like, guys, that's our entire business supports sprayers. And I know they offer a bunch of other products. And,
Right. I mean, like, and that's the thing that there's so many different options that we can use. We can move into biologicals.
Yeah.
We can move into alternatives for weed control.
Yep.
And just because I'm saying it doesn't mean that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, the great conversation we're having around my problem with wheat in Iowa. Okay, so I'm trying to plant some spring wheat into rye in like 2 weeks. I should have killed this wheat last week, but it snowed and I can't do that. Really, our best option is either tillage, which makes the regenerative guys not happy, or chemical, which makes the organic guys not happy. So my options are, if I'm trying to grow a more niche product that I do want to be able to bill as not fully organic or fully regenerative, but like, hey, I tried. I want to be able to say, like, hey, we did our best to do this. I really don't want to have to go out and kill this rye with some sort of chemical. Like, I don't want to have to go and spray Roundup on this. I don't want to have to go put paraquat on it. Like, that's not my mindset behind that. And the problem is that everyone, like, the number one recommendation is you should just go do that. You should just go do that. But in my head, I'm like, I don't even care about the actual real science behind it, which I know that sounds awful when you say it out loud, but like, I care about the perception that my consumer has, because I can do as much education, I can do as much lobbying, and at the end of the day, if that person has made up their mind, can I change their mind? The population has made up their mind. Glyphosate is bad. It's giving them cancer. I think I am starting to agree with that more and more as time goes on. Not because I'm a scientist, just because it's like, hey, I think there is a lot of data starting to come out that, hey, there might be some correlations here.
You know, I just know from my career that, like, I can use these products, and for years and years I applicated sprayers days upon days, hours upon hours, and I suffer the health consequences now. And I'll look at my dad, and I know that the reason he's in such bad health is because of the chemicals we used over the years. And so, do chemicals cause a massive amount of injuries in the United States in our food system? I'm not sure I can make that leap, but I can say that chemicals over the course of time will damage your health, and because of that,
That's just common sense.
Yeah, it is. I mean, anytime that you have too much of anything, it's going to hurt you. I mean, and if you're applying chemicals, you know, that we know, especially in excess, will cause cancers or other health problems like Parkinson's or neurological diseases, and we're applying those things over and over again into our fields and on our crops, of course, we're definitely going to have problems from that at some level.
And the thing with science is like, first of all, science can be manipulated to say what you want, which I know is exactly what I'll say. If Bayer conducted the study, do you think they're going to want to actually publish any results saying that what happened, like, it had negative effects? If you're Bayer, no, you don't ever publish yes, it had negative effects. We're going to learn more about these things in the future. We're starting to learn that maybe sunscreen hasn't been the best thing for us in the past, 20 years. Haven't we all been told our whole lives put sunscreen on? And now we're learning that, hey, actually just like getting out and giving your skin some sunlight actually might be one of the healthiest things you can do for you. The recommendation for how long has been put sunscreen on? How long has it been? Your whole life?
Yeah, my whole life.
And now we're all realizing, hey, it's okay to be a little tan. Yeah, your skin might get a little saggier and dry out, but like, skin cancer is going to happen, and it's not gonna happen, but skin cancer is so common. Like, even if you wear sunscreen all the time, are you actually going to prevent it? So there's just so much we're learning there. We can talk about that all day. I think we should go into something that I also have been thinking about, this new farm, that I think could help us kind of delve into how could we do things differently, is like, let's talk about the first principles of farming. So Elon Musk's whole thing is basically first principles of anything. That's how he solves problems. So to define first principles are the fundamental foundational truths or assumptions that cannot be deduced from any other proposition. So what is the foundational truth of our industry? How do we farm? Like, what is farming? How do we define farming? What is the first principles idea of farming? In my head, it's soil, water, seed, sun, right?
Yeah, I mean,
is that how I grow a crop?
Yeah, definitely. Those are the key ingredients to growing a crop.
Like, technically fertilizer, yes, but theoretically, that's not actually a first principle. Fertilizer is a Band-Aid for bad soil.
Sure, there's minerals available in the soil, sunlight and water, keys.
Yes.
Along with the minerals available in the soil.
I think that's why Jason Mock and these relay croppers have had such success, is because what are they doing? They're maximizing sunlight and water. At the end of the day, you take out fertilizer, you take out nitrogen, you take out even the seed variety. You're choosing water and sunlight. Water and sunlight. Why the heck do end rows usually yield so good? It's because those end rows got a bunch of sun that the inner rows did not get.
Yeah, I've seen over the course of my career that, those tall, lazy soybeans will always be out yielded by the short ones that the sun can strike from the bottom to the top of the plant. And corn is much the same, if you have a super tall and rangy corn plant, it can be to a detriment. You can begin to get disease in that lower canopy because the sun, the sun is the giver of life and it's the healer of disease. And if it can't reach that lower canopy, you start to get funguses and molds appearing, where if the sunlight was had the ability to strike those lower canopies, you wouldn't encounter as much disease. And that's one of the reasons that intercropping has been so successful, I feel like, is because if you have, you have 2 corn rows and then bean rows on either side of it, those corn plants have the ability to get the sunlight they need to stay healthy, and has, water advantages as well.
Yeah, and it just it brings it back to, why is our system the way it is? Why have we built it the way it is? And why can't we break out of it? Why can't we seem to get out of this system that seems to consistently not serve us? Like I'm looking at, we're starting this farm in Iowa. We're starting this new farm where we don't have to do it the way, you inherited a farm operation that in some capacity did have to operate more or less how it operated when it came to you, because you have infrastructure, you have all these things. I don't have any of that. I don't have to think that way. I don't have to think about how do I scale and create a row crop operation. I can think about, how do I farm? How do I, put my seed in the ground, give it some water and sunlight, and make some money off of it? Like, how do I do that first?
I think one of the reasons that I think we saw a move away from diversification and into where we were specializing is, one is we were in an undeveloped market, where land was still at value, and the supplies that it took to grow the crop were still at a value in the last 60 years. And what happened was, as the market became fully developed, land left the value situation and went to a extreme capital cost, and along with all the goods that it takes to purchase a crop, did the same, where that scarcity of the resource began to take hold. But it's kind of like, what do they say? Tossing a lobster in boiling water and it doesn't realize it's boiling. Or you put it in cold water and it doesn't realize as the temperature heats up that it's eventually boiling. That's kind of what happened to the U.S. producer, I think, is they got started farming 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago in an underdeveloped market. And, as time goes and they specialize more and more, that developed market came up on them all of a sudden, and boom, we're here in the situation we're in.
Yeah, and we had a couple shocks through Great Depression and through the 80s that kind of like just reinforced this mindset of like, you figured out what has worked consistently, do that over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, and sure, it was so successful for so long because we are in that underdeveloped market. I mean, if you're having success, for years upon years, remaining profitable, remaining at a sustainable growth level, why would you ever change?
Yeah, and the problem is now we're at this point where we have to change.
Yeah.
But most people, I don't think are willing to, because we have this system where, and also legislatively, I'm going to pull up this Purdue article that we went over, and it mentions a great thing that I forget about. All of this, whether we like it or not, is all supported by government policy. All of this continues on because government policy continues to support it. So I think it is, there's no new comments. Stop looking over there. I want to close that window. Government policy supports all of this. Government policy continues to perpetuate this and makes it so on years like this, what is every row crop farmer in the country hoping for right now? Another payment. Like, that's really what we're hoping for, right? We're farming for another payment, right?
Well,
are you hoping another payment comes later this year?
I think that those payments cause just as much problems.
I agree. I'm not saying it's good. I just
I think that they're a Band-Aid in a very bad situation. But I think most farmers, by and large, now realize, they see, like when those bridge payments were getting ready to come out, the fertilizer took an automatic price increase the 2 weeks leading up to that, and the grain market took a step back. And so basically all the money that was put into the farm economy was taken right back out due to market situations. And I think people have realized that. So, yes, I think, people are going to need those payments to continue to make their payments to their banks and things. But I also feel like, by and large, the farmers have realized that these payments are very detrimental, and they really would just like either the current market situation to improve or alternative markets that they could sell into.
But the problem is that no one's actually going to change anything. What's going to happen? You will take the payment because your neighbor took the payment, and that for you to be able to compete on the next land auction, or to be able to compete at the next equipment auction, or for you to be able to go to your banker even and say like, hey, your banker expects you to take that payment going into the next year,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like, you have that expectation. So do you take it or do you not take it?
Yeah,
And
I
if
mean-
people stopped all taking it, the government would be like, why is no one taking it? I mean, no, the government would just keep printing checks as the government does. But like, everyone would be like, wait, why are we doing this? A bunch of people aren't using it. But people do use it because, well, we must.
I do think you're seeing diversification rehappen again, where people are getting back into animal agriculture, and I think people are beginning to look at alternative markets and alternative crops. Now, is it going to be a fast transition? No, I think it'll be very slow. For one reason, it just takes a long time to develop a new market, and it also takes outside the box thinkers.
Yeah.
And I think those are bred through adversity. And that adversity is here, and it just takes innovators time to innovate. And so, will we transition out of the current model we're in? Yes. I just don't know how long it'll take.
And will it have sticking power? Like, that's the other thing. Is like, will this be a thing that guys do and they like it and they keep going, or will this be like, yeah, I tried that for a few years, but row crop was just easier. It's more consistent.
I think you'll have both. I think you'll have people that that diversify, and then they're like, man, that is tough, and it's so much harder than just selling into a fully developed market like the corn and bean commodity space, and they'll leave it. But I think there will be people that innovate. They enjoy the innovation. They enjoy the alternate type of business, and they stay in there. And because of that, you'll see the industry change from what you're currently seeing right now.
And that's who we want as our viewers. So if that's you, keep watching. I think let me just go over some highlights from this Purdue study. The question asked by the Purdue study is, why is diversification so hard? And Purdue's business review discussed why being diversified farm is hard and what it looks like for an ag business to adopt. The system: farmers stick to corn and soybeans because it's low risk and highly supported by policy, e.g. the crop insurance, ethanol, all that stuff. The alternative is diversification, rotation, livestock, agroforestry. It offers survivability and better performance during supply chain shocks, but massive hurdles like lack of local processing and social pressure to keep clean conventional fields. Do you feel that pressure to keep clean conventional fields?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants weeds in their fields. I mean, you drive by a field and it has a bunch of weeds sticking up out of it. Nobody wants to see that. So, I'm not, I'm probably the world's worst about making sure my field is 100% clean. But what I've found is I can use I can look at some alternative practices that have helped me do that with a lot less herbicides.
Yeah. Anyways, back to the agribusiness article. How agribusiness can pivot. So this was designed for Purdue's agribusiness viewers. To stay relevant, companies must transition from transactional suppliers to system partners, de-risk change, build infrastructure for alternatives crops, and offer specialized agronomic advice. Target innovators, create tools for young farmers focus on regenerative and organic systems, and lobby for flexibility, push for insurance policy and changes that reward soil health and not just yields. I don't know if the person who wrote this article actually farms, but like, those are a lot of terms that just don't ever seem to go well with farmers. But it does bring in the system partner idea that I do really like. I think our industry needs more people willing to think at the system level of, okay, how do I as an ag business spring up as a system? Like, even while I was just sitting here, I got a text from a guy who potentially wants to sell us a mill. By the way, we have someone sending us links for mills right now, so we're still looking at buying some flour mills. We got some leads. But thinking about us as, okay, if we're going to spin up a new business, and I won't go into too many details, but how do we not just be a vertically integrated farm, but how do we create a system for a new market that could not have exponential growth, but have kind of a flywheel effect to it where, hey, we spun this thing up And the more people who join it, the bigger we grow it, and the more it happens, the more it goes. And hopefully, through a stronger system or a more resilient system, we can create this dynamic flexibility for us as farmers, but also for farmers we work with of like, hey, we offer higher contract price and we have better milling partnerships, or we have a better logistics network because we have such a globalized commodity market currently. How do we go down to the local system level, work off of first principles of like, hey, what is the limiting factor? What is absolutely fundamentally true? Get rid of all the system BS that we've been told of like, well, you just you got to take your grain to the elevator and do this. It's like, okay, well, why do you have to do that? Well, why can't I take it here? Why can't I take it here? Why does a food company actually have to be the one packaging it? Like, why can't we just push against some of these boundaries? And I look at Elon Musk and what he did with Tesla and what he's doing with SpaceX. Everyone told him it could never happen. That's not how that works. That's not how this industry works. And here we are 20 years later, and he lands rockets and catches them with chopsticks in the air. And now he's producing more vehicles a day than any other company. And like, they just have revolutionized so many things. And like, our industry needs that push of like the person who's going to look and say like, why is that a boundary, and why can't I just like run through that wall and like push it over?
I think there is a co-op in Nashville that has kind of broke the boundaries of normal ag. I think they've got about their name is missing me right now, but I think they have about 400 producers currently, and they produce all kinds of different commodities, heritage grains, grass-fed meats, honey. Basically anything that an animal or a plant can produce, they have a network of farmers that are producing high quality food and then offering it to the consumer in that region. And they've been very successful with it. And I think, as we stay locked into these continually down markets, I think you'll see more and more similar models like that, where producers band together, especially innovative producers, and they are not only growing the food, they're packaging it and processing it to the point where it can be put on a store shelf in a co-op situation, and where one producer maybe produces 3 goods, but you have another producer down the road producing 3 more, and you can put an entire store together like that.
My thing is, I love the idea of that. Like, I do love the idea of that structure working, but most people still buy at the grocery store. Like, you're going to Walmart, you're going to Kroger, you're going to Whole Foods, wherever you're going, like that's your grocery shopping. And so I've probably seen a dozen apps in the past few years that talk about like, hey, you can buy your food directly from the farmer. You can, check it. Like, there's this guy who's just trashing industrial agriculture every single video he makes, but he's got this app where it's like, hey, you can connect with local farmers and go buy from them. I love that, but most people aren't going to do that. Like, once you have your grocery buying habit, you have your grocery buying habit. Like, I know people who don't even go to the store. They only just click a couple buttons on their phone and it's delivered straight to their door.
Sure.
And so when I talk about system level change, like, I believe in that. Do I think the country as a whole will start buying their food in a different way than they do now? I don't know if that will happen. I could be wrong.
I think one of the biggest challenges is just the cost, and so, the thing about processed food at the end of the day is it does fit people's budget. Mm-hmm. And so people can kind of pick and choose the products that they feel like, hey, this is such a level above what I can get at the grocery store. I'm willing to pay extra for. And, I do think that there is a portion of people that are so health conscious, especially our younger people that are just coming on to be purchasers of products now, are more likely to jump into a model like what you see out of that Nashville Farmers Co-op than your traditional buyer, like in our household, where we do buy some produce and some meat that is, like at very high grade, but we still buy a portion of our just, JBS bacon or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I think that brings in another article I kind of have pulled up is food as medicine could benefit farmers to the tune of $56 billion, report says. Small to mid-sized farmers could reach reap 5.6 billion in additional revenue a year if food as medicine programs were large enough to reach all Americans who need them. A new report from the Rockefeller Foundation says scaling to meet the needs of 43 million Americans who have diet-related chronic disease and struggle to afford a healthy diet would increase the annual demand for healthy food by up to 50.2 billion. Wow, that's a lot. That's big. By aligning health, agriculture, and economic development priorities in an FIM program design, states can multiply the economic impact of FIM, which is food and medicine, delivering healthier communities, stronger local economies, and more resilient food systems. FIM interventions currently only reach about 1 to 3% of Medicaid and Medicare patients, the report says. However, more than half of the states have pursued some form of policy change to expand or explore food as medicine, signaling growing bipartisan momentum.
I think
You have some firsthand knowledge on this.
yeah, I think what people don't realize is our food there's two major systems that produce a ton of the food that is consumed in the nation today, and that's the school system. They provide 3 meals a day for students, and then the hospital system. And just those two systems together use a big portion of the nation's food. And so if we can just get those two systems to a healthy food supply, that is an automatic market nationwide that has the ability through the government to produce flash freezers, canning systems that are able to aid the farmer in getting the crop out of the field and packaged and then into those systems where they can be consumed and they're healthy, fairly fresh out of the field. Even though they've either been canned or been frozen, they're still healthy in that the farmer produced them right there locally. They came into the food system, they are quickly packaged, and then they're put back into the system rapidly.
The problem is, though, and I'm just being devil's advocate, but you know this too, there's a guy, his name's Carter Williams, the investor from FarmCon that we've talked to. System A is the food system, and there's System B, which is the medical system. System A and System B should work together to make System C, right? Well, System A and System B both really don't want food as medicine to happen, because you know what it means? They make less money from their processed food, or they make less money off of the medicine that they supply these sick people. If you're a pharmaceutical company, theoretically your job is to make people healthy, right? But good customers are sick customers that come back over and over and over
Sure.
and over and over. And I'm not saying that's across the board, but the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry is huge. It is one of the largest employers in the country because everyone's sick. Drugs cost so much money, and the food businesses there's like 5 of them anymore. There's like 5 companies that control the whole food system. They make so much money, hypothetically off of just the processing that they have. Like, they have this leverage over the supply chain, and food as medicine threatens the idea of, well, if we just meet the people's needs in the school systems and the hospital systems and all these places, our biggest threat is now System C, which is healthy food, local food, infrastructure that supports those systems. And so in my head, I'm just thinking, how does that happen? Well, you probably know because you work with some of the government. It's like, hey, you got to have some sort of policy coming in and forcing the business's hand to make that happen, which as a libertarian, I'm like, I don't like that. But also, like, if you are the top executive at a pharmaceutical company or you're the top executive at a big food company, obviously you don't want your SNAP recipients to not be buying your soda from the store. Like, why would that can't happen? I saw an article the other day of someone saying, like, yeah, people should be able to buy soda with SNAP dollars because it's vital for their survival. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? They can get tap water with fluoride that's even healthier.
Rand Paul just battles against it all the time, But I think Secretary Kennedy is working his butt off to try to decouple the pharmaceutical industry from the hospital industry, and also the, trying to get these systems on board with each other where they realize, I think at some point we're gonna reach a point where we're spending so much money on healthcare that there is going to have to be a major change. And what is that change? That is healthy food for a big portion of our population, so that then instead of instead of having to rely on the pharmaceutical industry for health, they're regaining their health through a healthy diet. And what is it going to take? It's definitely going to take regulation at the government level to make that change, because right now in our current system, processed food is so easily accessible. It's also funded by the government. It's placed in our hospitals. It's placed in our school systems, and because of those reasons, it's very difficult for the healthy food industry to really get a strong foothold.
And I don't think the ag industry actually is behind it either. And I think that's the problem, is we have big ag, big food, and big pharma all saying, yeah, we want healthy people. We want healthy people. But you remember that one wheat growers dinner we went to? It was probably 3 years ago at Commodity, that was sponsored by Frito-Lay, and everything was covered in chips for some reason.
Yeah, it was so gross.
It was, cauliflower should not be covered in Cheeto dust, guys. Like, why? Whose idea was that? But, that dinner is like the culmination of exactly all the issues that we have in all of our industries. We have Bayer's VP getting up saying, we have definitively proven that Roundup definitely doesn't cause cancer, and we have won this case against the lawsuit in California. And then we have Frito-Lay, a big food company. They took great, beautiful food, and they put processed crap all over it that didn't even taste good. And there's all these men in suits. There's an open bar. Like, a bag of oranges went for like $5,000 at this auction, and we're eating Frito-Lay covered cauliflower for dinner. And it was just like the culmination of, okay, this guy bought a bag of oranges at an auction for $5,000. Everything I ate was covered in chips. And then Bayer's up there saying Roundup doesn't have cancer. And I was just sitting there. I was like, why do we do this? Why am I still in this industry? Because it's just like, all the problems are there in the room. We have a high-level executive or someone from one of the boards who probably got, lots of money flowing through the room. We have a big ag company saying, hey, this is not an issue. We don't believe consumers are wrong. And then a big food company saying, yeah, eat this stuff. It's great for you. And it's just like, I just sat there and I was just like, this is the problem. And we're all, and I'm there, like, as a part of it. It's like, I'm condoning this by being here. I believe in this,
I do think a big something that's happened here recently that is going to be a major benefit to our industry is inverting the food pyramid. Proteins are very important to our diets, and
of course
cows are still large eaters of grains. So yes, we can still use our grains because the cattle and the hogs and the chickens all feed off of those grains to gain. But then if we focus on those proteins, and that portion of our diet going forward shifts to those abundant proteins, I can see a way out of the situation we're in.
Yeah, I could. And it's got to be consumer demand. At the end of the day, as long as we can, and I think it is happening. That's what gives me the most hope. It's like, I had a conversation with Spencer driving over here about just like how many calories are in everything for unnecessary reasons. Like, why does this have 30 grams of sugar? I had pulled pork for dinner. It was one of those prepackaged ones. We're staying in the cabin. We didn't want to make a huge meal. So we just bought some frozen pulled pork. There's 30 grams of sugar in my pulled pork. And I'm sitting there looking at this. I was like, why? Like, and that's my mindset. And the younger generation, like, I'm teaching my kids to have that mindset, because I'm like, read the labels, know what's in things, know what ingredients do, and understand how that affects your body, because I think that's really important. And so I think it is happening. What I want to see, and kind of going back to the first principles thing, is like, I want to see a company in our industry, and maybe we're going to be the ones that start it, but like, I want to see a company in our industry at Commodity Classic one day that says, hey, yeah, we play in the commodity system technically, but we are approaching it from a system level so much differently than everyone else is, that we can play in this room, but it's very clear that we are not a part of the rest of it. Like, Commodity Classic was just a giant noise fest this year. It just felt kind of tone deaf given the economy. And it's like, okay, cool. Biological, tractor, biological. It's like, okay, cool. What are you all doing to change the industry? What's all improving? And it's just hard to watch sometimes the state our industry has gotten into. And so we need some disruption. That's why I also brought up the disruptor conversation. Like, we need a company to come in and just like really like establish themselves on the map and start like making some of these bigger companies like really consider, is what we're doing helpful for the population? And I think that's really the first principle that we need to go back to, is like, we think about farming as growing a plant on the ground to produce economy, but the first principle of farming is food for people. Like that's what we have to go back to, is like the first principle of farming is producing something to feed a human or an animal, right? Like
Yeah.
that is farming, is to produce something to consume theoretically, and hopefully not a tractor or a car, with ethanol and biodiesel. So how do we create that change? What type of company would it be that causes that? Like how do we what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's just gonna. I think that's one of the dilemmas we're facing as producers, is just understanding that the model we're in is a difficult model to overcome, but then being an outside the box thinker to think, hey, how do I innovate myself out of this? Because just doing the status quo is not working over and over again. It's like running your head into the wall over and over. Eventually your head's going to break.
I think a lot of guys heads have broken. Like I was gonna reference, like, okay, if you just take a guess, which state has the highest Chapter 12 bankruptcies last year? What state would you guess?
Arkansas.
It's always the South. Not to be mean, it's a joke on Twitter. Everyone on Twitter is always like, yeah, they always pick a farmer from Arkansas or Mississippi to represent how bad the ag economy is every single time, because they're if we're talking about the systemization of everything, they're systemically stuck in typically something like cotton or peanuts and corn and soybeans
Or rice.
all things that are like, if we think corn or soybeans are bad, like guys, you see the payments the rice and cotton guys got last year, crazy.
Well, they're so highly specialized, and it requires tons of tillage, and tons
specialized equipment and
tons of infrastructure,
of
so they're
wells,
heavily invested in their farms. I mean, it's just a difficult situation for those guys.
And the problem is that with that infrastructure at scale, you can only keep doing that unless you want to sell it all and start over.
Sure. I mean, I think that's the problem for them, is they've got so much money invested in infrastructure, they have to continue to grow those specialty crops. And when those specialty crops are oversupplied and they're especially capital intensive, it puts them in an unwinnable situation.
Yeah. But on the flip side, we need to stop letting them be the ones whining about how bad the industry is, because when we're whining about how bad the industry is, it's a bad look. Like we need to start putting people on the map of like, yeah, I did something different, like I'm trying something different. Like the barn talk guys are putting that manure separator on their operation to like separate the liquids from the solids and be able to, I think, turn some of it into methane and then use the rest for fertilizer. It's like, oh, like that's something that's like, you're trying to figure out a better way to utilize what you already have. Or the guys like Jason Mock who are doing different crops. Like I bet you, Jason, I don't know if he's talked about the profitability online, but like I bet you his like relay crop acres or his interseed and stuff is way more profitable. You talk to any of those guys, it's way more profitable per acre than what most other guys are getting. So we just need to get better as an industry of highlighting those guys who are like really doing something, rather than saying, oh, government, I need money, which happens a lot.
Yeah, and I think you are seeing that. Like I said, I think you're seeing more diversification. You're seeing guys that are looking at alternative markets. I think you're looking at guys that are vertically integrating. I mean, and it's gonna. The more years we stay in downturn, the more of those guys you're gonna see.
Yeah. So, it's I love our industry. I think it's an incredible industry. I couldn't be more excited to start to farm in a year like this. But it does, the longer time goes on, the more I look at a corner. Like you're talking about putting soybeans in the ground today, and I was like, dude, I have no desire to do that. Like there's no bone in my body. It's like, you know what I want to do? The only reason I want to put a soybean in the ground is for nitrogen fixation for the next year. Like that's all I like really think about. It's like, oh, nitrogen next year. Like that's all that's going through my brain. Because it's just, we have this system where it's like you grow the commodities, you sell them at scale, you hope the trade's good, or you hope the local processing has enough demand. And if we're going to start this farm in Iowa and we're going to experiment with some of these different grains and things, like, no, we need to like completely rethink the way we approach this if we want to stand any chance in the next 20 years. Like if we end up in 10 years having a 5,000 acre row crop farm growing corn and soybeans, cool. But also, like, did we accomplish anything other than now having 2 farms?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to see, I think you'll see specialized areas where there's, especially going forward, where you'll have very developed, like large herds of animals that need to be fed. Those areas will produce wildlife feed, and will produce animal feed, and then and then you'll have areas that, especially around urban centers, where they're producing massive amounts of produce for those urban centers. I think that is one of the trends you'll see going forward.
I believe it when I see it. I think we'll move towards either more diversified per farm, like each farm is more diversified, or, and we'll see the, hey, I farm 10,000 acres, but there's a guy who has, a herd of 150 cows that has a rotational grazing, like lease grazing operation, that also is going to come onto my acres and graze after I'm done harvesting. And he pays me a little bit, and I make a little extra money off my acre. He gets all this great ground to graze on. And so you could see some more scale synergies of like, hey, I am not the guy who owns the livestock, but I do farm a lot of ground that I like to have livestock manure on. So I have a really great relationship with a guy whose job it is to truck cows around to different fields. Because that's already a model out west, is like the rotational contract grazing, where it's like you don't own land, you just own the cows, and you're moving them around all year. Like that's kind of your thing. So you just are managing the pastures, you're managing the land. You could see a similar situation like that somewhere in the Midwest, where it's like, hey, maybe it's not just pastures. Maybe you have pastures you have leased out, but it's like, hey, every fall I bring my cows out, or I bring my sheep out, or I bring my chickens out. Like there's so many different ways it could go. It's just a matter of when will it happen? When will people catch on? Will people be able to make enough money this year and next year? Probably not, to start investing in things like that. So, all right, I think that's all we got for you guys. This will all be in podcast form on Spotify soon. Thank you for listening. We enjoyed it. We will probably be back next week and maybe more consistently. If you are watching, send us a message at some point on YouTube. Just like comment on one of our videos saying I watched the live stream. Let us know if this is a good time, or if you'd rather have it midday, because we're considering moving to midday. So just some things to think through. Thank you for watching Atlas Ag News. This show is brought to you by Atlas Media, your go-to source for high-quality media. If you want to work with us, give us a call. The best way you can support the show is like, share,